If you've ever wanted to rebel against a rule, you're not alone. We all get the urge to rebel against rules that we feel restrict our freedoms. And everyone responds to rules differently. You might push back on almost every single rule just because you can. Or you might find it easy to obey most of the rules because, hey, they must be rules for a reason. But no matter how you deal with rules, at some point you're going to come face to face with a rule that you just can't help but rebel against or dislike. So, what do we do about the rules that we don't want to follow? How do we handle our frustration about not being as free as we want to be? Well, we're looking at a letter written by James to early Christians struggling with rules too. There were hundreds of rules that you can find in the Old Testament. Some of them, one of them is like, don't wear clothes made of more than one kind of fabric. And if you find an ox on the side of the road, stop what you're doing and take it back to its owner immediately. The obvious stuff. Maybe it seems weird that God would have so many rules given in the Old Testament. But before we just dump them on the side of the road where we found the ox, know that they had a purpose. Some rules kept the Jewish people safe and healthy. Others set them apart so that they could be seen as different from the other nations, because after all, they were God's chosen people. And still other rules taught them how to live peacefully with each other. And then many of the rules helped them connect with God. These rules, they did serve a purpose, but after Jesus showed up, the Jewish people who followed Jesus began to realize that things had changed. Because Jesus had made things right between them and God. They weren't required to follow all of these rules anymore, but some still thought that they did. And so James is writing a letter to help explain some of this. Let's read. You must be doers of the word, and not only hearers who mislead themselves. Those who hear but don't do the word are like those who look at their faces in a mirror. They look at themselves, walk away, and immediately forget what they were like. But there are those who study the perfect law, the law of freedom, and continue to do it. They don't listen and then forget, but they put it into practice in their lives. They will be blessed in whatever they do. Well, the law James is talking about is not the laundry list of over 600 laws that the Jewish people had followed for so long. And here's what Jesus had to say about God's rules. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had left the Sadducees speechless, they met together. One of them, a legal expert, tested him. Teacher, what is the greatest commandment in the law? And he replied, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. You must love your neighbor as you love yourself. All the law and the prophets depend on these two commandments. When Jesus said, all the law hangs on these two commandments, he was saying that deep down at the heart of all the rules was God trying to teach people to truly love God and to love one another. And if we can do that, we're following God's law. Love is how we become doers of God's word rather than just hearers. Even if we follow every rule exactly, if we're not loving God and others, we're not following God's law. But Jesus came to free us from that transactional sort of love so that we don't have to do anything in order to earn God's love for us. We're already loved. But with everything we learn, we have to start here with the law of love, because God's law sets us free to love God, others, and ourselves. And God's law helps us see how big God's love really is. So remember, we don't have to follow thousands of rules to be perfect and lovable. We just have to follow the right rules that can set you free. And the most important one is love.